What's the greatest gift a human being can ever receive? Is it wealth? Is it power? Is it influence? Or the respect of the world? We live in a time where success is measured by the size of your house, the car you drive, and the money in your account. But what if the true measure of life isn't what you have, but what you give? Today, I want to take you on a journey. A story about two boys, two friends, brothers at heart. They had the same dreams, the same fire, the same determination to conquer the world. But life has a strange way of separating paths. One rose to greatness, showered with recognition and wealth. The other was left behind, battling disappointment, searching for light in a world that often felt too heavy. And in the end, when fate turned the tables, they both discovered the answer to the question that has echoed through every human soul since the beginning of time. What is the greatest gift? Childhood is a place where dreams are born, where imagination runs wild, and where friendships are formed that often shape the entire journey of our lives. For Daniel and Michael, their friendship began on a dusty little street where barefoot races, scraped knees, and endless laughter painted the story of their early years. They were not just boys growing up in the same neighborhood. They were brothers by choice, inseparable in every adventure. Every morning, the two could be seen running down the path to the riverbank, wooden sticks in hand, pretending to be warriors conquering kingdoms. One day, Daniel would shout, holding his stick like a sword, "We will rule the world, and nothing will stop us." Michael would laugh, his eyes bright with fire. "Yes, and we'll build castles so tall that the clouds will come down just to visit us." They dreamed big, because as children, limitations don't exist. They weren't thinking of poverty or privilege or the heavy weight of reality. They only thought of what could be, and for them, the future was endless possibility. Their bond was more than just friendship. When Daniel's father passed away suddenly, leaving his family in grief, Michael was the first to show up at their door. He didn't have much to offer, just a small bag of fruits his mother insisted he carry. But he offered something more valuable, his presence. He sat beside Daniel, and together they cried, not as two boys, but as two souls who knew the value of being there for each other. That moment sealed something deep. They learned early on that life wasn't just about victories and celebrations. It was also about having someone who would stand with you in the shadows. Together, they created their own little world. When the school bell rang, they would sit under the mango tree, books open but conversations flowing freely. They shared stories about who they wanted to become. Daniel dreamed of becoming a great businessman, traveling the world, making deals, and building empires. Michael, on the other hand, wanted to be a teacher to inspire children who, like them, came from little but dreamed of much. And though their dreams were different, their hearts were united. They both wanted to make their mark on the world. They promised each other that no matter what happened, no matter where life took them, they would rise together. "If one of us succeeds," Michael would say, "then both of us succeed." And Daniel would nod firmly, sealing the promise with a handshake, as though they were signing the contract of their destiny. But you see, life has a way of testing promises. Childhood dreams are pure, but the road to fulfilling them is paved with storms. Storms that test loyalty, patience, and faith. Still, in those younger years, Daniel and Michael had no idea of the trials ahead. For now, all they knew was the innocence of youth, the comfort of companionship, and the endless beauty of dreaming without limits. There's something powerful about childhood friendships. They teach us the very first lesson about love. Not romantic love, but love in its truest, most selfless form. Love that shows up when you're hurting. Love that shares food even when there's barely enough. Love that believes in your dreams as much as you do. Looking back, we often realize that these moments were shaping us more than we knew. The laughter, the fights, the reconciliations, they were all training grounds for life. And maybe that's why it's so tragic when friendships fade as adults. Because somewhere along the journey, money, status, ego, and pride creep in. The very things we once said didn't matter suddenly become the barriers that separate us. But in this chapter of their lives, Daniel and Michael were still inseparable. The world was wide open. Their bond was unbreakable. Their love, though they didn't know it yet, was the greatest gift they could ever give each other. As the years rolled by, Daniel and Michael grew taller, stronger, and a little wiser. Childhood gave way to teenage years, and with it came the first whispers of responsibility. No longer were they just boys chasing dreams under the mango tree. They were young men now, standing at the edge of reality. School became more serious. Teachers reminded them daily that their future would depend on how hard they studied. Daniel, always ambitious, took this to heart. He devoured his books, asked endless questions, and dreamed of scholarships that would take him far beyond the borders of their small town. Michael, too, was dedicated, but his heart leaned more toward people than grades. He often stayed behind after school, helping younger students with homework, explaining patiently even when it cost him his own study time. It was here that their differences began to show, not as weaknesses, but as different paths forming silently beneath their feet. Daniel's drive was fierce. He joined debates, competitions, anything that would push him closer to the spotlight. He thrived on recognition, the applause of his peers, and the nod of approval from his teachers. Michael, on the other hand, was quieter. He found joy not in winning trophies, but in seeing someone else succeed because of his help. To him, fulfillment was not in being noticed, but in making a difference, even in small ways. And though these differences existed, their friendship held strong. They still walked home together, still dreamed aloud, still believed they would rise together. But teenage years are not without struggle. Their families were not wealthy. There were days when Daniel would show up at school with torn shoes, carefully polished to hide the wear. Michael often carried books held together by tape and hope. Lunch was sometimes a luxury neither could afford. Yet, in those struggles, they found strength. They learned the art of sharing. One would bring food when the other had none. They learned the meaning of encouragement, lifting each other up after poor exam results, reminding one another of their dreams. These little acts, so simple at the time, were shaping their understanding of what true wealth was. Because wealth is not just about possessions. True wealth is having someone who believes in you when the world doubts you. Maybe you've had a friend like that. Someone who cheered for you when you couldn't cheer for yourself. Someone who saw your potential even when you only saw failure. If you have, then you know, that kind of love is priceless. That kind of loyalty is rare. And if you haven't, perhaps this story will remind you to be that kind of person for someone else. One summer, the boys worked odd jobs to support their families. Daniel found work at a small shop, where he quickly impressed the owner with his sharp mind for numbers. Michael, meanwhile, helped at a local community center, teaching little children to read. They laughed about their different paths, but deep down, they admired each other. Daniel admired Michael's patience, his quiet strength. Michael admired Daniel's ambition, his unstoppable drive. They were different, yes, but together they felt unstoppable. Yet, life has a way of testing bonds when you least expect it. Small cracks began to appear, not because they stopped caring, but because the world around them started to whisper. Daniel will go far, people said. He's destined for greatness. And about Michael? He's kind, but kindness doesn't pay the bills. Words like these, though never spoken by the friends themselves, began to draw invisible lines. Daniel felt the pressure to live up to expectations. Michael felt the sting of being underestimated. But through it all, they still held on to their promise. If one of us succeeds, then both of us succeed. Isn't it interesting how the world measures worth? How society often values achievement over character, wealth over kindness, status over love. And yet, the very things the world dismisses are often the things that matter most in the end. Daniel and Michael didn't fully understand this yet. They were still too young, too focused on what was ahead. But soon, life would teach them in ways they could never have imagined. Adulthood arrived like a tidal wave, sweeping Daniel and Michael into different currents. After finishing school, their paths, once so tightly wound together, began to stretch apart. Daniel earned a scholarship to study business in the city. It was everything he had dreamed of: bright lights, tall buildings, opportunities at every corner. He dove in headfirst, absorbing knowledge, making connections, and chasing every chance to prove himself. Michael, on the other hand, stayed behind. His family couldn't afford further schooling, and scholarships never came his way. So he worked. He took small teaching jobs, tutoring children in the evenings, doing odd labor during the day to help his parents. Life was harder, slower, more uncertain. Still, they tried to keep in touch. Daniel would call sometimes, sharing stories of lectures, professors, and his plans to start a company someday. Michael would listen, smiling through the phone, genuinely proud of his friend. He would share his own updates, small victories, like a child finally learning to read, or earning just enough to pay the bills. And though Daniel congratulated him, the difference in their worlds was becoming clearer. Daniel's victories were loud and celebrated. Michael's were quiet and unnoticed. With time, Daniel's star began to rise. After graduation, he landed a job at a major firm. His sharp mind and relentless drive set him apart. Promotions came quickly. Soon, he was driving a car, wearing suits tailored to perfection, and living in an apartment that overlooked the glittering skyline. Michael, meanwhile, was still struggling. His income was barely enough. Some nights, he went to bed hungry, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. His shoes wore thin, his clothes faded, but his heart remained steady. He still believed in love, in kindness, in the quiet victories nobody applauded. This is where the cracks widened. When Michael called, Daniel answered less frequently. Sometimes, weeks would pass before a reply. "I'm busy," Daniel would say. "Work is demanding." And Michael understood. Or at least, he tried to. He told himself, he's chasing his dreams, just as we promised. One day, he'll remember me. But the truth? Daniel was changing. Success was feeding his ego. Slowly, without realizing it, he began to see the world through different eyes. Eyes that judged, eyes that compared. In his mind, success was the result of effort, and failure was the result of laziness. He forgot the struggles they had once shared, the poverty they had once endured together. Pride has a way of blinding us. It whispers lies. You did this on your own. You're better than those who didn't make it. If they failed, it's their fault. And Daniel listened. He began to look down on people who struggled. He called them careless, unmotivated, lacking vision. He no longer remembered that Michael had once carried him through grief, that Michael had shared food when Daniel had none. Success made him forget. Meanwhile, Michael never stopped trying. He sent letters, left messages, reached out whenever he could. Not for money, not for favors, but for friendship. For the bond they once promised would never break. But Daniel, caught in the whirlwind of wealth and recognition, pushed those memories aside. And maybe this is where many of us falter. We forget the hands that held us up when we were weak. We forget the voices that prayed for us when nobody else believed. We forget the people who loved us before the world applauded us. And in forgetting, we lose something far greater than money can ever buy. Michael's life grew tougher. His mother fell sick, and hospital bills weighed heavily. He knocked on doors, begged for opportunities, but rejection met him at every turn. Still, he refused to give up. He reminded himself daily, as long as I can give love, I am not poor. As long as I can serve, I still matter. But even as he clung to hope, he longed for his friend. Not for financial help, but for presence, for a conversation, for the Daniel who once stood beside him under the mango tree, promising they would rise together. And yet, that Daniel seemed to have vanished into the glittering towers of the city. Isn't it strange how quickly life can separate us? How dreams can unite us in childhood, but pride and circumstances can tear us apart in adulthood. Daniel and Michael were once brothers, bound by love and sacrifice. But now they were strangers, living two different lives, walking two different roads. And though Michael's heart still reached out, Daniel's pride built a wall too high for love to climb. Daniel was living the dream. His name was spoken in boardrooms. His signature sealed deals worth millions. His calendar was filled with meetings, his wallet heavy with wealth, and his social media pages painted a picture of a man who had it all. Cars, houses, vacations abroad. He was the image of success. But more than money, Daniel had something else: pride. Pride that whispered in his ear every morning, "You did this. You are unstoppable. You are above the rest." Slowly, the boy who once shared torn shoes and empty lunches with Michael had disappeared. In his place stood a man who scoffed at the very struggles that once defined him. "People fail because they're lazy," he would say in interviews. "Poverty is a mindset. Success is available to anyone who wants it badly enough." His words inspired some, but wounded many. Because not everyone who struggles is lazy. Not everyone who is poor lacks vision. Sometimes, life hits harder than ambition can endure. But Daniel had forgotten that. He had forgotten that once, he too had nothing, except a friend who believed in him. Invitations to parties and galas flooded his inbox. He was surrounded by people, business partners, admirers, those who wanted to bask in his glow. Yet, in that crowded world, he was more alone than ever. For though he was celebrated, he was not truly known. He had traded genuine connection for empty applause. And Michael? He was still trying. Still sending messages. Still knocking on the door of friendship. But Daniel never answered. Not once. How many of us have done the same? Ignored the people who once lifted us, because we're too busy, too proud, or too distracted? How many friendships have we let die, not because they stopped loving us, but because we stopped remembering them? Pride blinds. Pride isolates. Pride convinces us that we don't need anyone. But pride always has a cost. One evening, after a long day of meetings, Daniel left his office. The city lights sparkled around him, cars sped by, and his mind raced with numbers and deals. He slid into his luxury car, confident as ever, and drove off into the night. But fate does not care about wealth. Accidents do not check bank accounts before they strike. Life is fragile, and in one moment, everything can change. Tires screeched. Metal crumpled. Glass shattered. Daniel's car swerved violently, colliding with the barrier before spinning out of control. The world blurred. The smell of smoke filled the air, and pain shot through his body like fire. When the car finally came to a halt, silence followed. A silence heavy with fear, with the question echoing in his mind. Am I going to die? He tried to call out, but his voice was weak. People passed by, some slowing to glance, but none stopping. The wealthy businessman, once surrounded by admirers, now lay broken on the roadside, invisible in his pain. Isn't it ironic? When you're on top, the world celebrates you. But when you fall, the crowd disappears. Hours seemed like minutes. Blood stained his shirt, and consciousness slipped in and out. And then, through blurred vision, he saw a figure approach. A man in worn-out clothes, carrying a small bag. At first, Daniel thought it was another stranger who would only stare and walk away. But this man stopped. This man bent down. This man looked into his eyes, and Daniel recognized him. Michael, the friend he had ignored. The brother he had abandoned. The man he had once promised never to leave behind. Michael gasped, panic in his voice. Daniel, hold on. I'm here. Don't close your eyes, you hear me? Stay with me. With trembling hands, Michael tore his own shirt to stop the bleeding, lifted Daniel's head gently, and called desperately for help. He had no car, no wealth, no connections. But he had love. And in that moment, love was enough. And as Daniel drifted in and out of consciousness, a thought pierced his pride, a truth he could no longer ignore. All his wealth, all his power, all his accomplishments, none of it could save him now. Only love could. Daniel woke up to the sterile white of hospital walls, the steady beep of machines, and the dull ache of pain that reminded him he was still alive. His body was bruised, bandaged, and weak. But his mind was racing. Images of the accident flashed before him. The screeching tires, the shattered glass, the helplessness. But above all, he remembered one thing: Michael's face. Michael's hands holding him. Michael's voice pleading with him to stay awake. Days passed as Daniel lay in that bed, unable to move, forced to reflect. And in that stillness, he saw his life for what it truly was. The parties, the awards, the luxury cars, what did they matter now? The admirers who had once crowded around him were nowhere to be found. Not a single one of them showed up. But Michael did. Michael, the friend he had ignored for years, was sitting quietly by his side, keeping watch, making sure he wasn't alone. "Why?" Daniel finally whispered one evening, his voice raspy, breaking the silence. "Why did you help me after everything? After I ignored you, after I pushed you away?" Michael looked at him, eyes tired but gentle. "Because friendship isn't about what you can give me. It's about love. It's about being there, even when the other person doesn't deserve it." Daniel felt tears sting his eyes. No deal he had ever closed, no car he had ever driven, no mansion he had ever slept in had moved him the way those words did. That night, Daniel lay awake, staring at the ceiling. And the question returned, what is the greatest gift? For years, he had believed it was money. That if he had enough wealth, he would have respect, happiness, and security. But here he was, broken and vulnerable, and all the money in the world could not save him from loneliness, from emptiness, from despair. It wasn't money that saved him on the roadside. It wasn't status or influence. It was love, raw, selfless love from a friend who had nothing but gave everything. Weeks turned into months as Daniel healed. Each day, Michael showed up, bringing simple meals, adjusting pillows, talking when Daniel was restless, sitting in silence when he needed quiet. Slowly, Daniel realized something profound. Wealth is fleeting, but love endures. Success is celebrated, but love sustains. Status fades, but love remains. And with every passing day, Daniel's pride began to crumble. In its place grew humility, gratitude, and a new understanding of life's true riches. When Daniel finally walked out of the hospital, he wasn't the same man who had walked in. The city still sparkled, the towers still shone, the world still rushed with ambition, but Daniel's heart was different. He looked at Michael, standing by his side in worn-out shoes, and he said with conviction, "You've taught me something no university, no business deal, no trophy ever could. The greatest gift is love." Michael smiled, shaking his head. "You knew that once, a long time ago. I just reminded you. And maybe, dear listener, this is the reminder you need too. Because we live in a world that constantly tells us to chase more money, more power, more recognition. But at the end of the day, none of that will matter as much as the people who love us and the people we choose to love. Love is not weakness. Love is not foolishness. Love is strength. Love is sacrifice. Love is the gift that money can never buy. But without it, all the money in the world feels empty. So I ask you again, what is the greatest gift? It's not the car in your driveway, not the title on your business card, not the number in your bank account. The greatest gift is love. The love you give and the love you receive. Daniel learned this truth the hard way. My hope is that you won't have to. Call your friend. Forgive that family member. Appreciate the people who stood by you when you had nothing. Because in the end, when everything else fades, the only thing that remains is love. So, what can we learn from Daniel's story? At the heart of it, his journey teaches us that wealth, fame, and material success can never replace the value of genuine human connection. When the lights go out and the applause fades, it is love, pure, sacrificial, unconditional love, that remains. Daniel believed money was the greatest gift. And for a while, it seemed true. Money bought him luxury. It bought him admiration. It bought him influence. But when he needed something deeper, healing, forgiveness, companionship, true friendship, money failed him. It wasn't wealth that pulled him from the wreckage. It wasn't influence that sat with him in the hospital. It wasn't fame that held his hand in the darkest nights. It was love. And that love came from someone who had nothing material to give, but everything spiritual to offer. My friend, love is not weakness. Love is not second place. Love is the foundation of life itself. Without love, riches feel empty. Without love, achievements feel hollow. Without love, even life itself feels meaningless. But with love, a poor man feels rich. A broken man finds healing. A lonely soul discovers belonging. Maybe you, listening right now, are like Daniel. Maybe you've been chasing success, pouring yourself into work, into ambition, into dreams of making it big. And perhaps, in that chase, you've neglected the people who truly matter, your friends, your family, the ones who have always been by your side. Or maybe, you've been like Michael, loving quietly, faithfully, without being noticed. And sometimes, it hurts when people don't see or value your sacrifice. But let me tell you this, your love is never wasted. Your kindness is never in vain. One day, it will shine brighter than gold. Daniel's story is not just about friendship. It is about priorities. It reminds us to slow down, to cherish relationships, to treasure the people in our lives more than the things in our lives. Because here's the truth. Houses crumble, cars rust, trophies gather dust, but love leaves a legacy that lasts forever. So, let me leave you with this thought. If you have someone in your life who loves you, a parent, a spouse, a friend, a sibling, you are already rich. Don't take that gift for granted. And if you have the chance to love someone, to show up, to forgive, to give, to stand by them, take it. Because love given is love multiplied. And in giving it, you too will discover that the greatest gift is love. As you step out today, I challenge you. Call that person you've been meaning to call. Apologize where pride has kept you silent. Show kindness, even when it isn't returned. And above all, choose love, because love is the one gift that grows the more you give it. The greatest gift is not money. The greatest gift is not fame. The greatest gift is not power. The greatest gift is love.